So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's session, the Launch Online Grant Program. My name is Corey Redderkop. I'm the Director of Policy and Stakeholder Relations here at the Burnaby Board of Trade. If you don't know me, I know many familiar faces on the line here. I want to start off by acknowledging that this event is being held, at least where I am here at the Board of Trade office, on the traditional territory of the Coast Salish peoples, including the Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, and Squamish nations. So we want to recognize that. And I wanted to kind of highlight that this event is part of our Center for Burnaby Business Recovery and Resilience, which is our hub for everything to do with the COVID-19 pandemic, our response, and our recovery over the next couple of years here. This was one of the key takeaways out of our task force for business recovery in the summer, was to create a one-stop shop for resources, programming, and tools for the business community. So the hub, you can find it on our website, and the center is responsible for a lot of our programming now. And we're just putting the finishing touches on a pretty significant initiative that will be launched hopefully next month to help small, medium businesses access some supports to make sure that their recovery can be as robust as possible. So we're excited to, I'll tease that out there. We're excited to get some details onto what that might look like for our community. But the center is made possible with the help of these organizations. At the platinum level, Simon Fraser University, BCIT School of Business and Media, and Douglas College. Our gold sponsors of the center are Electronic Arts and the TD Bank Group. And our silver sponsors are Pacific Blue Cross, Fortis BC, and Hemlock Printers. And they're really the core foundational partners of the work that the Center for Business Recovery is doing this year. And of course, I always like to mention our annual partners, an even bigger group of great corporate citizens who, without their support and involvement, the Board of Trade wouldn't be able to do what we do throughout the year. So big thanks to our platinum, gold, and silver partners, which you can see on the screen in front of you. So we're here talking about the Launch Online program, and the session here is really going to be a good chance to get some information on this program. This is the kind of hands-on support that we were really keen to see from government, and we really were advocating for hands-on support to help businesses get online and increase their digital footprint. We ran our own program in the fall to help businesses do e-commerce, which we'll talk about here, website development, social media. So we're really keen to see this program get off the ground and launch, so to speak. So I'm thrilled to have Maya Duffy, Executive Director with Planning and Innovation at the Ministry of Jobs, Economic Recovery and Innovation, to take some time to join us today to go over the session. Maya's going to be discussing the Launch Online Grant Program, some of the details around how you can apply and how it works. I think that she's got a little bit of some information around the digital bootcamp as well, which the government is offering. And really, we think this is a great program that businesses should be aware of and make sure that they're finding a way to leverage if it's something that would help them in their recovery. So Maya, I'm going to pass it over to you and let you run with it here. So I'm going to make sure that you're spotlighted and you can go ahead.
Thank you, Corey. Yeah, my name's Maya Duffy, and I'm with the Minister of Jobs, Economic Recovery and Innovation, and wanted to start with thanking you all for the opportunity to come and talk to you about the Launch Online program. So this is a program that I've been involved with sort of from the concept to delivery, and I'm sort of leading it for the ministry. Although we do have our partners in Alacrity Canada who do the administration of the program for us. So they have been great to work with. So I wanted to give you a quick overview first of the program for those who may not have heard of it yet, and then of course, we can open the floor for some questions. I think I received some questions in advance as well, so I'm trying to weave in some answers as I talk, but if I do miss any, or if there's any other questions that arise, then feel free to ask those, and feel free to interrupt too if it makes sense to ask your question at some point.
And make sure to pop, and I'll do the interrupting first. Make sure you pop your question into the chat box there. We do a number, so once we kind of gone, Maya, once you've done kind of the overview, maybe we can run through some of the ones we had in advance, and then anyone who has questions, feel free to put those in the chat box so we don't lose them, and we'll make sure we try to tackle them before the end of the session. So sorry, Maya, back to you.
Absolutely, no problem at all. So yeah, the Launch Online originally was sort of established to really support those brick and mortar businesses who have lost their customer base as the lockdown started to happen, and needed to really think about moving their operations online so that they can compete with others who were selling online, and people were able to make their purchases through some sort of e-commerce service instead of actually going into shops in person. And that was kind of our original starting point. And then as we launched the program, we heard from service side of things. So it was really focused on those businesses that were selling goods, as opposed to service providers as well. And then we did hear from quite a lot of businesses after we had launched that service providers are also struggling, also could benefit from some online support. So as we loaded some further funding into the program, we also expanded the eligibility criteria to include service providers. So it covers expenses that towards either an online e-commerce system or an online booking system for those service providers who have, repeat customers and can manage their operations that way without having to have that in-person interaction, or at least reducing that in-person interaction to some extent. Of course, with services, it's not always possible to completely eliminate that. What the program is, so it provides a grant, which is a grant that does not have to be paid back to government, up to $7,500, and it covers 75% eligible expenses. So eligible expenses within this program contain things like the service providers who would be building the online platforms or providing other services that support e-commerce type of activity. It could be hiring someone to do digital marketing for your company, or it could be hiring somebody to train your staff in terms of using the e-commerce, using the online shop and maintaining it, improving it, all those kinds of things. But it also includes expenses towards digital marketing costs. So we also allow costs towards, Facebook ads. If there's subscriptions to, for example, Shopify, there's a bunch of local providers that provide these types of services as well. So it really is, as long as it's something that is in support of the e-commerce, then it is eligible. Search engine optimization, all kinds of things. We haven't necessarily created a list that is, defined, because there is all kinds of things out there that we may have not considered. So we just don't want to limit it too much. But as long as it is something that is e-commerce related and supports those functionalities within your business, then those are considered eligible. And then, of course, if there is some sort of a gray area there that it could not, then always contact the program team first before you sort of assume, as with any other program. So the 25% of the costs, which then is left for the project, for the business to cover, can also come from other grant programs. So there's other provincial grant programs, for example, the Small Business Recovery Grant Program, and there's also some federal programs that have been providing grant funding to small business. If you are a participant through those grant programs and you're receiving funding, you're also able to stack these programs. So there is no limitations put in place where if you've received funds from one program, you cannot use this. You absolutely can, of course, not submitting the same expense through two programs. Obviously, that's not something that is allowed. So in terms of the application process, so we've tried to keep it pretty straightforward and in terms of the amount of effort that needs to go into it. However, we are asking for a proposal, which is quite a high level proposal, but it basically asks you to demonstrate how you intend to use the grant funding within these eligible expenses. So we've divided that proposal into 3 buckets. So you have those service providers who have to be BC based and registered to do business in BC. Then you have the digital marketing expenses, which obviously can, that there is no specific requirement to use BC-based services, because of course, a lot of those are through providers that are online and multinational. And then the 3rd bucket is training your staff, whether it's digital marketing, whether it is managing the inventory in the back end of your e-commerce operation, or anything to do with the sort of overall management and ongoing operations of that e-commerce can be part of that training. The program doesn't cover salary costs. So if it's an in-house training being provided by one employee to another, then that is not something that the grant covers. So this proposal asks you to sort of allocate the amount of funding that you would be utilizing for each of these 3 buckets, and then asks you a high-level proposal. How are you proposing to spend the money towards eligible expenses? It's all built into the application form. So as you start filling in your application form, obviously this is the part that you need to have been thought about and planned in advance, especially around the service providers, because you do need to make sure that the service providers that you use are BC based and registered to do business in BC. But other than that, you are asked sort of the tombstone questions that will demonstrate the eligibility criteria for the actual program. So to be eligible, the business must be owned by a BC resident or residents. The business's sole or primary operations are located in BC. The business is currently operating, and this is less of an issue now that it perhaps was earlier in the pandemic, where we had more of those orders where certain types of businesses were asked not to operate. That's not really as relevant right now, and it perhaps was at the time. Is registered in BC, and this means through BC registries, and we are asking for the BC registries number in order to be eligible for the program. Employs less than 149 BC residents. So this includes sole proprietors as well. So if you are a registered business as a sole proprietor, then you would be eligible for this program. And I think that was one of those early questions that I received as well. But what about sole proprietors? Because of course, in some documents we say employs 2 to 149 BC residents, but sole proprietors are also included. So perhaps a better way to say is employs less than 149. And obviously pays taxes in BC. We're also asking for the federal business number and the GST number, and that the business has generated sales of more than 30,000 in the past year. So we're asking, it can be either in 2019, which is obviously pre-pandemic, or it can be in 2020 now as well, as we sort of getting into this further into this year, and 2020 is a relevant tax year now. So one other criteria is as well that the business does not have an existing fully functioning online shop. So this is really intended to businesses who either cobbled up together a very, very basic online shop and doesn't have all the functionality and really needs it improved, or those who don't have online shop at all, or e-commerce functionality at all. So we've put together some criteria that asks what do you have in place, and that is part of the adjudication criteria when we go through the proposals and the application forms and approving for the grant. So for those ones who already have fully functioning e-commerce in place, but could potentially use some of the other funding that this program offers, for example, funding towards digital marketing expenses or funding towards staff training expenses. Those businesses with fully functioning e-commerce already in place, we're sort of directing to some of the other programs like the Small Business Recovery Grant, which has much broader scope in terms of what can be included in your recovery plan. And e-commerce and all e-commerce related pieces are also included there, but then so is much more. Whereas this is for a very specific purpose, this particular funding program. So like I said, 7,500 per business, and that is an up to. So if your application states that you have your project costs for eligible expenses will be 5,000, then the grant would cover half of that, or sorry, 75% of that. If your project cost comes to 10,000 or more, then up to 7,500 per business would be covered through this grant program. And some of the ineligible expenses as well, just to recap. So we are really focusing on e-commerce. So this is not intended to fund general websites or IT upgrades. Again, there's other programs potentially for those types of things if that is necessary for your recovery efforts. This isn't intended to start an e-commerce business which intends to sell products on behalf of other companies, so those types of aggregators. So really, the intent is to support existing businesses as they're trying to survive through this pandemic. It's not for hosting an existing site, credit card processing, packaging materials, for product shipping and shipping related costs and staff salary costs. So those are the types of things that have been highlighted previously, and decisions were made that we really want to focus the grant money for e-commerce and also the online booking systems. In terms of timelines, we have received a lot of applications. So initially we had sort of suggested that it would take about 3 weeks to hear back. And then of course, once application is conditionally approved, then there is several steps that happen before the grant funding is actually issued. We're not asking for proof of documents at the application stage for a couple of reasons. Security is one of them, and also there's storage of all of that documentation for all of those applications that potentially aren't approved. So once that conditional approval happens, then Alacrity Canada or someone from the program will contact and then request proof of all of those eligibility criteria that was defined at the front end. Those documents then get validated. There is a grant agreement that gets signed, and then the payment is issued. So that's kind of the process, and there was a little bit of a backlog at one point because we were positively surprised how popular the program was, and then had staffed up a little bit. So I think the backlog is now done, and we should be back on track with sort of being able to process these applications in a more timely manner. But fully acknowledge that if there's anyone who has applied and had to wait a little bit, we are aware that was the case at one point.
Maya, could you? I know I got a couple of questions on this around the funding and how
Yeah.
they fall into play. Could you just go over that maybe quickly one more time about, so they get conditionally approved, and then when do they? Yeah, because I mean they're using service providers, so when do they need to pay the service provider? Or so that contract before when do they know they actually have the money? So there's some confusion or some concern about kind of signing a contract with your service provider before the contract's signed with you guys.
Yeah, and there's no need to sign the contract with the service provider in advance. It's more sort of get your quotes, get your ducks in a row, submit your proposal, and then the intent is that you would be getting the grant money first, and then after you receive your grant money, you can then do your project. There's 12 weeks to complete your project, and then of course there is expense reporting and expense summaries to submit back following. But this is sort of a traditional grant program in that money is provided in advance, as opposed to a reimbursement type of scenario following a project completion. So that's the order of things, at least in theory.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for the clarity on that, because I know I had a number of questions come in around the timing on that. So thank you.
Yeah. And we had sort of suggested that 12 weeks is probably plenty of time to get a project like this completed. Usually it probably takes less time than that, but understanding that sometimes if you have one service provider potentially supporting several businesses, there might be delays. And we know that some tech companies have been very, very overworked during the pandemic. So there should be sufficient amount of time for that. And then, of course, for sort of our purposes, there is a reporting. There is the final reporting requirement for the project or the grant recipients, but then there's also a evaluation survey that will follow about 6 months after the project is completed, because we really want to understand the impact of the grant and what did that look like for boots on the ground and for businesses. So that's something that will follow as well, as a little bit of a reminder that you have participated in this program down the road. I think that's probably it. So launchonline.ca is where you would go to submit your application. And there's also contact details for the actual program staff.
Sorry, and I know we've got a bunch of questions in the chat box coming. So I know you wanted to kind of tease a little bit or touch a little bit on the boot camp. Did you want to maybe go on? We can go onto that screen. That way I can kind of get rid of the screen share, and then we can maybe tackle some of the questions that have come up.
Sure. Yeah. So the bootcamp was really, I know it wasn't a topic of this this particular meeting, but what I wanted to do was just highlight that we also have the Digital Marketing Bootcamp, and it is free of charge for BC businesses. And we've just, we've sort of continued to offer it for time being. And it's an 8-week course. It's virtual. It's pretty intense. It requires about 24 hours of study time every week. And it goes through over 40 different tools and techniques and tips in terms of digital marketing. So if you are getting, moving your operations online, you get your e-commerce set up. If you're able to send a staff member or attend yourself onto this course, then it's a great option to really learn the skills and techniques to maximize your sort of ongoing digital marketing abilities and capabilities within your business. So I just wanted to throw that in there, that it is currently offered free of charge for BC businesses, small and medium-sized businesses.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I know we had that on the slides there, so I'll make sure we got that in, and that's another good resource to share there. So I'm going to get rid of this backdrop here so we can see, everyone can see us a bit easier there. So I've got a number of questions that have come in through the chat around the Launch Online program. So yeah, I'm going to maybe dive in. We can, in the next 15 minutes we have left, we can try to tackle some of these if you don't mind, Maya. I appreciate you taking the lightning round here. I got a two-part question from Daniel, and I think I think there's going to be a good answer for the first part and not a good answer for the second part for him. But his question was around improving existing systems. So he's got a current online booking system. But I know that the program mentions that you can make improvements to existing ones if they're missing certain criteria. So his first question is, can the grant be used to improve existing online stores or online booking systems? So we will start with part one, and you can share a little bit about how it works with people that have things that are existing.
Yeah. So yeah, there is an option for improving existing online booking systems or online shops, and it really is based on some functionality. So if there is limited functionality with your current system, then and you want to improve those, then you can put that into your proposal for consideration. If you have some functionality completely missing, then obviously that's generally what is really looked at. So the key features that we're looking are sort of customer registration and information security features. This is for the online shop site. Shopping cart and order management capabilities, payment processing options, including application of appropriate taxes and shipping costs at the time of ordering, product catalog, search and inventory status, and then website analytics and reporting capabilities. And then similarly for the online booking system, does it have customer registration and information security features, schedule navigation and reservation management features, payment processing options, including application of appropriate taxes if applicable. Of course, not all services necessarily require payment upfront. So if that's not part of your business model, and usually it's just used for booking appointments, for example, and then payment happens afterwards, then of course, put it right in there, your proposal that that's not something that would apply for your business. So you wouldn't necessarily have to build something like that into your booking system. Then automated replies and reminders, and website analytics and reporting capabilities. So this is kind of the lens that these existing systems are being looked at, as well as how we look at the end when the expense summaries are submitted and the URLs to the product that has been produced with this grant money. These are the things that are looked at and measured against to look at that, yes, you have actually used the funding as it was intended to. And this would be sort of a starting point as well for reviewing an existing system to see what you need to do to improve it. So you would have to be able to really explain it in your proposal that, these are the functionality that is currently not available or needs significant improvement for your booking system to be then accepted as an eligible expense.
So thanks, Maya. I'll put it in the chat box in a second, the link to our COVID pages, and we've got all the details of the program and all of the programs there. But yeah, there are definitely, I think there's 5 criteria that are being used as kind of lenses. So a new system has to have them, and if your existing system doesn't have it, then as Maya mentioned, there's certain pieces that can be improved. So Daniel, the first answer to your question is yes, you can under certain circumstances get it improved if you already have one. The second question that you asked is about whether if the system that you already have happened to be developed by an outside of BC company, so say they're overseas or they're not in BC, can they still apply for the grant? So did you want to touch on I know we mentioned that there's a BC-based requirement for the service providers for building the programs. Does that remain for improving existing systems?
So I think with improving existing systems, if you're intending to use the same provider from out of country to do those improvements, then that would not qualify. If you have an existing system, it was built outside of the country, but it's here now, and you're hiring someone else to manage the improvements for you, who is BC based and registered to do business here, then they would be qualified.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that's the person doing the work. It's got to be the BC base. So Daniel, I thought I would have a good and a not so good answer for you, and I think that was how we got there. Maya, one of the questions that come in the chat box and that we discussed ahead of time was around the eligible expense or the eligibility criteria around revenue. And I think you may have touched on this, but there's a question around here about new companies who have started either, I think I may have flagged it with you, end of 2020, or this program going until September. So a company could have started now and could meet the 30,000 threshold, but obviously it won't be in 2019 or 2020. So is there any flexibility around a company that doesn't explicitly have the $30,000 in revenue for 2019 or 2020? Because they're new, is there any flexibility around them getting into the program?
I think the tricky part is there because the businesses would have had to be paying taxes, and I guess if they've already started to charge for GST, PST, or collect PST, then that could be argued as, you know, they meet all of the criteria, because A, if they meet the $30,000 threshold, and B, they are now collecting PST, they, you know, that effectively could be argued as being eligible. I'm not actually sure. I haven't asked the question from our service provider in terms of whether we have had these cases approved for really new businesses that have really just recently started. So what I might do is I might just circle back on that particular piece, just to make sure that I'm not saying something that then is at odds with what actually happens in practice, if that's okay.
No, of course, and I appreciate that, because one of the areas that we've seen and we've been advocating is that there's both provincially, federally, a lot of the programs, if you happen to have come into existence after the end of February, beginning of March, you really were cut out of a lot of the programs. So yeah, if you could circle back, because I know there's a couple of businesses I know of who have started in January of this year and have more than made the threshold for 30,000. They're collecting PSC, they've got employees, but it's just the year in which that revenue is not the one that's on the application form. So we can circle back on that and maybe get some more details. Yeah, and the revenue, like demonstrating the revenue piece, is probably more straightforward than the paying taxes piece if you're so new that you haven't really started that process yet. And I know with new businesses often it is unfortunately the situation. And with this particular program, we didn't put any criteria around must have been in operation for 18 months or 2 years or whatever. A lot of grant programs do that, and I do understand that it would be very frustrating for those who are recently founded. But yeah, I will look into that just to confirm, so that I'm not providing information that is inaccurate, and then we can, if Corey, you can disseminate that. Yeah, I can circle back to the audience.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Thanks, Maya. One of the questions I got, it's similar into the question we had around the service providers. But I know you mentioned that you can use online ads and things that might drive people to your e-commerce site. And obviously, I think you mentioned Facebook, either you did or online. I mentioned Facebook ads. Obviously, Facebook isn't a BC-based company. So one of our members here, Jocelyn, mentioned one U.S. company by name here that does kind of funnel marketing or kind of provides funnels in for business. Where's the line drawn between kind of the third party stuff you're allowed to do that is not BC based? So yeah, Facebook ads or those types of things, and then when it has to be a BC based company.
So I think the biggest differentiator here is that if it's a service provider that you're hiring to provide services for you in terms of like, for example, a company that you're outsourcing to do your digital marketing for you, then they have to be BC based. If you are doing digital marketing, if you're, you have a staff member who is doing it for you and purchasing Facebook space, ad space, for example, for you, or working through search engine optimization for you, then those types of things can be when it's sort of almost it's purchased online and there isn't a way to sort of do it here in person. If you outsource it to a company to do all of that for you, then that service provider must be BC based and registered to do business in BC.
Thanks. And Jocelyn, the one you mentioned specifically, from what I understand about them, they probably fall to more on the service provider side than the Facebook side, just based on what I know about them. Yeah. There's a question here around eligibility for not-for-profits. Lots of the programs are open to not-for-profits and as well as businesses. Where is the requirement, or how is this program, the Launch Online one, open for not-for-profits that maybe have a social enterprise, or they might have a store, or they might have the need for the e-commerce or the booking system, but they're not a business?
Not-for-profits can also apply. They are eligible. Being a not-for-profit is not a deterrent in and of itself. We have since discovered, though, just for transparency's sake, that in terms of registering for GST and or starting, the requirement to start charging GST is the limits are different for not-for-profits. For not-for-profits, it's 50,000, whereas for business, it's 30,000. And we have a 30,000 revenue limit plus has to have a GST number, which there is a bit of a discrepancy with regards to not-for-profits. So unfortunately, it's not quite as clear cut, but just because they have registered as a not-for-profit is not a deterrent, but it might require maybe, registering for a GST earlier than they otherwise would have if they really need and want this particular grant. At this time, we don't have a workaround around that problem, unfortunately, right now.
No, but fair enough. But yeah, summarize that. So yeah, they're not ineligible off the bat, but they have to make sure they meet all the other criteria.
Absolutely,
perfect.
Yeah.
I think we probably have time for one more question before we wrap up some comments here. There was James had asked around, is there a list of service providers in BC, or are people they just find them wherever they find them?
No, we don't have a list. We have been directing some companies potentially, for example, other resources. There's, through like the DR3, the Accelerator Network, that have put together list of service providers. Unfortunately, might not necessarily work in Vancouver as much as perhaps in the regions. But really the rationale for not doing a pre-qualified list of service providers was that we wanted businesses in the regions and also in Vancouver to really find who they want to work with and start building those relationships. If you go online and you have an e-commerce, it can often become, a long-term thing. It's not something that you sort of set up and then it just runs itself. It requires ongoing upgrades and maintenance and new tools and techniques, etc. So building those relationships with local service providers is really, really key to keeping the momentum going and keeping your e-commerce site up to date and functioning. So instead of sort of limiting it to a small subsection or section of providers, we wanted to keep it open and allow businesses to sort of pick whoever they want to work with. But then, of course, for those who just don't know where to go, then, of course, we do sort of provide a little bit of guidance in terms of how they might be able to locate somebody without necessarily providing any guarantees of the quality, of course.
Exactly. Yeah. No. So I'll make a plug, Maya. Now that we've met, if anyone has applied and needs any suggestions, send them our way, because we've definitely have a lot of great members who are part of the Board of Trade network who are doing great work in this space. So I'll make a shameless plug for our members there. I know I said that was the last question, but I'm a liar, so we'll do one more. This is one that I'm curious about. We had someone type it in here, because you mentioned being surprised with the uptake. How has the uptake been? What are we halfway through the money? Are we 80% of the way through the money? How much? What do you know? How much more runway there is on applications, and how quickly everyone needs to run out of here to get those submitted?
I would recommend sooner rather than later. We are getting pretty up there in terms of being fully subscribed. With the first $12 million that we put into the program, we were fully subscribed within 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And that took us by surprise. We knew that it was going to be popular. We didn't know that it was going to be that popular. Then, of course, an additional 30 million was put into the program. So that has, lasted for a little bit, but we are getting up there. There's still room right now. There's still room if you submit over the next few, days and the next week or two, for sure. But you definitely want to get on it if you're planning to.
No, perfect. Yeah, exactly. And I know we I think we had an event with Minister Callon a week and a half after the thing launched, and he was already saying at that point that it was at 40 or 60% gone after a few days. So, which I think if you want any, again, not that you've asked, if you want any other solicited feedback from the business community, this is the exact kind of hands-on support which we think there's a lot of traction there. I think, as you've seen, I think if there's money to help us actually execute things on the ground, I think the proof is in the pudding, and we're pleased to see the program got expanded and that has been uptaken as well as it has been. So appreciate everyone joining in for the questions here and for the discussion. Maya, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your thoughts on the program. Again, go to our website, bbot.ca, and you'll find all of the program details written as plainly as I can on the COVID programs. And if you ever had any questions around something or something that doesn't seem right, drop me a note or contact me. I'm your partner here at the Board of Trade. Make sure you understand these programs and how they work. But definitely, as Maya said, don't let too much grass grow on this one. You want to get your applications in sooner rather than later on that one. Maya, again, thank you so much for coming out and joining us and giving some information on the Launch Online program. Thank you all for dialing in. Again, if you have any more questions, check our website, contact me. The Board of Trade is here to support you through whatever's left of the pandemic, hopefully not too much, and then the recovery as we go forward from there. So again, have a great rest of your day, everyone, and take care, and we will see you again soon.